if Stone Country decided to attack them again. Naruto inwardly cursed his sensei for opening his big fat mouth. He of course didn't know where it was, nor did he know if it was open. All of his information were just rumors at best, and he honestly couldn't say, "Sorry, I lied. I'm now the Shinigami's avatar, and I have to kill your old student, Uchiha that should be dead, and a guy named Danzo. Oh, and guess what? I'm Sasuke's cousin." That was when something clicked, and he almost stopped breathing. Sasuke. Sasuke was family. He was blood-related to Sasuke Uchiha. He couldn't believe it had taken him this long to realize this. For the first time since he became smart, he felt like an idiot. He realized with the start that Sasuke may very well be the only blood relative he had alive in all of Konoha. But he wasn't exactly sure if he liked that or not. I mean, Sasuke was an okay guy, but he could be a real asshole at times. His musings were brought to a halt as he heard the Sandame's voice. "What?" he questioned him as he snapped out of his trance. "I said, do you remember where it is?" the Sandame repeated. Quickly taking advantage of the question, the black-streaked blonde replied, "No, I'm afraid not. All I remember was an uncomfortable bed, hearing them mutter about losing their benefactor, feeling lots of pain, and seeing red. Everything else is just a blur." Sarutobi only nodded. He remembered Guy going through a similar experience during the Third Great Shinobi War. The event was known as the Crimson Forest that earned him the title, the Green Beast of Konoha. Sakura, however, had to burst the Hokage's thoughts. "Then why do you have those beasts on your shoulders?" she demanded in a commanding tone. "It's simple. Once I escaped, I found them all alone. And being the nice guy, I adopted them as my own." Naruto casually replied, once again not addressing her by name, and not even turning around to acknowledge her presence. Zabuza couldn't take it anymore. While what Naruto said was informative, it didn't change the fact that his and Haku's fates were on the line, and his agreement with the former blonde was still solid as iron. Yes, he was alive now, but he died, and the Seven Swordsmen's last rites were too serious to be broken. It's been that way since the group was created, and it would remain that way until the end of time or Water Country was wiped off the map, and all her shinobi, missing ninja, or not permanently killed. "Hokage-sama, I hate to interrupt, but what is going to happen to us?" the Demon of the Mist asked the old Kage. Hiruzen Sarutobi, while an old man long past his prime, looked at the infamous Demon of the Mist. His eyes, old and slightly dulled over the years, still pierced their souls like a sharp kunai in his soft, tender flesh. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the old Hokage replied to him, "Zabuza, your crimes are extensive, especially your failed assassination of the Yondaime Mizukichi. Plus you are wanted in killing Kamei Torichi and a few other of my leaf shinobi." He then directed his attention over to Haku. "And Haku, you are still technically a citizen of another country, and your bloodline, while outlawed, is still registered until the last of you die." Both of them looked down, not liking where this was going. They knew they were going to have to fight their way out, or die trying. However, the old Hokage smirked. However, he started out getting their attention. "I never liked that brat of a Mizukichi, and this would help us in the long run." "So, we can stay?" Haku asked, her voice filled with hope. "Yes, you can stay. However," he shouted out before they could do any type of celebrating, "both of you will be under house arrest until I judge you are trustworthy. I'll send a few of my elite Umbu squads to make sure that you behave." That deflated their spirits, but it was better than losing their heads. "You're all dismissed. And Naruto, I want a full report from you tomorrow at noon." Sarutobi then dismissed the members of Team 7, while the Umbu members waiting outside the door took Zabuza and his surrogate daughter to their temporary home. Once outside, Kakashi bid them farewell before waking off to do whatever Kakashis do, and Sasuke nodded at the two before heading to his apartment, leaving Naruto and Sakura alone. Giving the girl a blank stare behind his mask, Naruto turned away and headed to his rat hole of a home. While he was heading to the poorer districts of Konoha, he pondered on what to do with Sasuke. While he was his cousin, he wasn't sure if he could live with him. While he seemed to change after his death, Sasuke still needed to mature a little in his opinion. The guy was still too broody, and he still acted like he had a stick shoved up his ass. He was about to turn a corner that leads straight to his apartment. He heard a voice behind him, and it was a voice he didn't want to hear at that time. "Naruto, you got a minute? I want to ask you something," said the pink-haired howler monkey by the name of Sakura Haruno. What do you want? Can't you see I'm trying to go home? He replied, still not facing her, nor addressing her by name once again. Sakura barely managed to keep her cool when he said that. It wasn't amusing the first 2 times, and it wasn't amusing the 3rd time. Come talk with me. It's important, she demanded before she began to walk down the nearest alleyway. Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here. Naruto growled out, showing the girl he was not in the mood to be dealing with this. That stopped her in her tracks, causing him to inwardly curse him for putting a hitch in her plans. Naruto, I know that we've had our differences, dash. Yeah, the differences, he spat at her. Anyways, the last mission made me think about life, and I realized it's too short, so I'll go on a date with you. And hopefully things will progress further with us. She giggled shyly, giving Naruto her cutest and sexiest pose, knowing that he would be putty in her hands once again. It, however, did the opposite. While Naruto would admit Sakura was exotic looking, she was a wilted flower on a magnificent tree. Such a pity. That's it? You pull something like this? Sakura, there is no us. During my time away, I've seen things you could never comprehend. I learned the hard way that his world is not all good like I thought it was. Instead, I find that there are no heroes, and that everyone will do anything to hurt you. If that is all you have to say, I bid you good day. Naruto said as he turned to walk back until Sakura grabbed his arm and tried to take his mask. He responded by rearing his masked head back and headbutt Sakura right in the forehead. The last thing pink-haired felt was pain and an overwhelming sense or irony before she fell to the ground in an unconscious heap. Taking a breath and smiling behind his mask, he pointed and yelled at her prone form. Bitch, you got knocked the fuck out. Cracking his neck afterwards, he muttered, Shinigami, that felt fucking good, and walked back to his apartment, with Ichigo laughing his furry ass off, while Binaheim just sighed at their antics. Meanwhile, hiding in the shadows, Sasuke saw the whole thing and was stunned, possibly even more so than the unconscious Sakura. Never in the entire time that he had known the former full-headed blonde had he ever heard him speak or do something like that, and Sakura was certainly the last person he expected him to verbally and physically abuse. Sighing, he picked up the unconscious girl and left to drop her off at her house and to try and solve the mystery that was Naruto. Little did he know that it would forever change him for life. A ringing sound blared in Naruto's ear. It was the most evil thing, second to paperwork. It was the alarm clock. Groaning tiredly, Naruto lifted his right arm and brought it down on the evil thing. Naruto Uzumaki hated, despised, and absolutely abhorred alarm clocks. One day, he would hold a grand alarm clock bonfire. It would be the greatest day in the history of Konoha that everyone would enjoy. Yawning, the Blackstreak Bond threw off his covers and sat himself upright in his bed. That's when he started feeling a headache coming. He looked at his katana, fully knowing that it sent someone who died to the afterlife. This recently departed soul was that of an old man. Apparently, he died of natural causes at the age of 79. He worked hard to provide for his family as a carpenter until he retired. And while he did a few bad things in life, he automatically felt that he was in heaven now. While the sword was cool and totally badass, he was a little annoyed that he had to know the information about them. He mentally noted to ask Shinigami about it later. Bringing his feet over his bed, he nearly stumbled. After all, how could you blame him? He was too used to being short, and for 2 weeks he slept on the ground. Sleeping in a bed was a whole new experience for him with his newfound height. It would take some getting used to, but like every situation that he encountered, he would overcome it. After regaining his balance, he stood up and looked around. That's where he laid his eyes on the sleeping forms of Ichigo and Binaheim curled up at the foot of his bed. He let out a true smile seeing the brother and sister duo sleeping peacefully, but Ichigo looked to be ready to wake up any second. Blamed the Bleach manga he read during his academy days, but that was why he gave Ichigo his name. He protected his little sister even when he knew he couldn't win. As for Binaheim, well, she was a crimson princess to him, even if her fur didn't show it. After staring for another minute, Naruto went into his small as hell bathroom and stepped into the shower, performing the various acts that one performs in the shower, not minding the icy coldness of the water because his damn landlord kept his water cold. Over the years, he found it soothing and toughened him up. That was probably the only thing he liked about his apartment. Stepping out of the shower, He quickly dried himself off and then positioned himself in front of the sink to brush his teeth. Now fully awake thanks to his shower, he stared at his reflection. It wasn't pretty. While he thought he looked like a grizzled, feral badass, he missed his old face. He honestly wished it didn't come to this, but sacrifices had to be made to keep up his charade. Last night he wrote out his report on his experience in Stone Country, and in the report was that he was subjected to brutal physical exercises, tortured to endure pain, and injected with something that inadvertently fucked up his healing process. Which of course made QB pump his chakra into him to make sure he didn't die. He made sure to make it as vivid as possible, though, to keep up his act. Or, in Shinigami's words, he just put the biggest load of bullshit on paper. Shrugging the sight off, he brushed his teeth and went to put his clothes on. When he opened his closet a second later, he smacked the side of his head in stupidity. Orange greeted his vision. He loved the color orange, he really, really did. But these just wouldn't cut it in his career anymore. These have got to go, Naruto muttered to himself. He quickly gathered the monstrosities into his arms and tossed them out the window. Sighing, he looked back to his closet to see he only had a few black t-shirts left, along with 10 pairs of orange boxers. There was no way in hell he was going to let go of all his obsession for that color. Looks like I have some shopping to do, he sighed out, honestly hating the mere thought of clothes shopping. After getting dressed in Ishikawa's extra clothing he found in his scroll, looked over to the 2 Fox kits, and created 2 shadow clones to keep guard. Before leaving, he strapped Hendon Ryoku to his waist, stuffed his report in one of his back pouches, and placed him Hanya mask over his face before leaving. Once outside, Naruto headed toward the Hokage Tower first. It was around 7 in the morning, and there were a few people out, but those few were giving him new looks. For once, the looks he was getting were completely different. They were ones of awe, curiosity, and his new favorite one, fear. Oh, that was a sweet emotion that he secretly wanted to see for a very long time. Any further thoughts on it were interrupted by 2 people shouting. It wasn't shouting like an angry shouting, but he couldn't describe it. It was so fast and contained the words youth he couldn't make them out. He turned around to see who the hell was screaming, and immediately wished he didn't. Running towards him were 2 figures. The first was a man who looked to be in his late 20s. He had black hair that was in a bowl-shaped hairstyle, black eyes, and massive black eyebrows. He wore a dark green spandex suit, the standard forest green Jounin flak vest, orange leg warmers, blue shinobi-style sandals, and wore his Leaf Itaiate as a belt. The second was a teenager at least a year older than him, but was the carbon copy of what Naruto believed was his Jounin sensei. The first one he already knew. He was Guy Mato, the green beast of Konoha. But the second one seemed familiar, but it eluded him for the moment. The 2 weren't a threat, he knew, but his instincts to him to run, and that's what he did. But that clearly turned out to be a mistake, because the 2 spandex freaks sped up to him until he was sandwiched between them. Guy-sensei, looks like we have a new participant in our morning runs, the guy look-alike screamed out. Yes, Lee, let us shower him with our flames of youth. Guy shouted at the teen named Lee. That caused Naruto to stumble and hit the ground with a thud, causing the 2 to stop and look at him funny. He looked up to see the 2 spandex-clad shinobi with disbelieving eyes. Lee? As in Rock Lee? Naruto asked the younger of the 2. Yes, my creepy masked friend, who are you? Lee asked the black-streaked blonde. It's me, Naruto. If possible, Lee's already bug-like eyes widened even further as he stared at his friend from their academy days. Naruto, is that really you? He asked as he extended his right bandaged hand. Accepting the hand, Naruto lifted himself up onto his feet and dusted himself off. In the flesh, my friend. What happened to you? You're all different, Lee asked after seeing all the changes in his friend. I could say the same to you, Naruto responded, looking at his spandex form. Haha, touche. Lee, you know Naruto? Guy asked after listening to their conversation. Yes, he and I trained together during our academy days. Lee replied Guy's question. Guy only grinned and gave him the nice guy pose. Well then, a friend of Lee's is a friend of mine, he hollered out and ended it with a smile that shined brighter than anything Naruto ever saw in his life. The mask-wearing blonde couldn't recall what happened after that. All he remembered was a bright, shining light, and the next minute he was on the ground, exhausted as hell, with Lee beside him and guys standing above them congratulating them for lasting as long as they did. "QB, what the hell just happened?" Naruto asked his tenant. "Apparently you went under some sort of trance due to the ugly ninja's teeth. Ran with them around the village 5 more times. Thankfully, you didn't shout whatever the hell these flames of youth are. And then you sparred with Lee for an hour. And then Guy invited the two of you to fight him in a 2-on-1 fight. I must admit you both displayed amazing teamwork, but in the end you got your sorry asses handed to you." QB responded impressed, but pretty displeased that Naruto participated with the two freaky humans. Note to self, watch out for Guy. Naruto mentally noted to himself. Grunting in pain, the black-streaked blonde lifted himself to his feet. He looked at Guy through the holes on his mask and saw, while the man was slightly dirty and bruised, he didn't have any cuts on him. That relieved him, knowing he didn't use his sword on an ally. Wait, where was his sword? He looked to his waist to see it wasn't there. Nearly panicking, he looked around to see it was on the sidelines. In the hands of a girl a year older than him, her right hand just about ready to unsheath it. "Stop!" he screamed out, stopping her in her tracks. The girl in question only looked at him funny. When she first got to her team's training field, she noticed two green figures sparring with each other. That wasn't unusual because Guy and Lee always spar with each other. She, however, did not notice the person with the mask with them, because her eyes were drawn to the sword on the ground. Now, while she kept herself busy training, she was a secret weapon otaku. After all, her dad owned a weapons shop. Picking up the sword, she nearly hyperventilated at its design, while the scabbard was ordinary and unappealing. The guard, however, was unusual because the tsuba, while it looked regular with its normal rectangular shape, it had small sharp edges on each corner that looked like it could cut someone, and looked like it was split in half with one side being black and the other white, the white side showing an angel and the black side showing a devil. The hilt was ordinary like many she saw in the shop, but the skull on the end of it disturbed her very much, especially when it felt like bone to the touch. The crimson tassel wrapped around the bottom of the jaw with a small hourglass with black sand inside the glass on the end of it intrigued her a little bit, but not by much because it looked like a noose around a person's neck. But the feel this sword gave off piqued her curiosity. It felt evil and yet good at the same time, and giving into her curiosity, she was about to unsheath it to see what it looked like and how it handled. But she heard someone scream at her, completely stopping her in her tracks. Looking up, she saw a mask-wearing black-streaked Bond running at her. Panting out of exhaustion, Naruto stopped in front of her. After taking a few breaths, he finally spoke to her. "Please, whatever you do, don't unsheath my sword." Blushing in slight embarrassment, she handed his sword over to him. "I'm sorry, I just dash." "Tintin, it's so nice to see you." Guy bellowed out, revealing the girl's name. "Yash, my teammate. I see you meet our friend." Lee followed in pursuit of his sensei. The girl, revealed as Tintin, could only sigh at the two embarrassing her, causing Naruto to get a good look at her. He noticed she had brown hair tied into two Chinese buns that made her look like a panda, with two short bangs that came over her Hittite and chocolate brown eyes. She was dressed in a sleeveless pink Chinese-style blouse that was trimmed in red around the neck and arms with dark green pants that came to about mid-calf and open-toed blue shinobi sandals. Her kunai holder was strapped to her right thigh, while her shuriken pouch was on the back of her left hip. Still analyzing her, he noticed she was only an inch shorter than him, and that her hands had many calluses that showed countless hours of weapons training. From what he could analyze, he knew she took her career as a Kunoichi seriously, unlike many others that he didn't want to think of at the moment. He was brought out his thoughts when she cleared her throat, causing him to look at her. "My eyes are up here, buddy," she said, almost waiting for him to stammer an apology, which gave her an excuse to beat him down like the pervert he was. Now Naruto wasn't unfamiliar with the opposite sex. Heli created the now 2S-rank forbidden sexy jutsu and harem jutsu, for God's sake. And he was glad the mask was one-sided, making him look out but no one could look in, because he was staring at her assets, if only for a few seconds, and would not doubt that would have brought down her feminine fury on him if she caught him. And unlike Kakashi the open pervert and Ebisu the closet pervert, he knew the safe boundaries of pervertism and normalism. "Your hands have calluses on them. I see that you take your job seriously," he replied, totally surprising the three around him. Guy and Lee, because he was actually focusing on her in general and not her womanly assets. And Tintin, because he noted the result from her training, she didn't know why, but her respect for the masked black-streaked blonde went up a notch, leaving him at notch 1. Oh, thank you. For a minute there, I thought you were a pervert. Naruto finished her sentence. Yeah, sorry, I've dealt with enough to almost have a sixth sense. Tintin apologized for her mistake. Anyways, I'm sorry for handling your sword. It was just so. That was where the bun-haired girl for once in her life couldn't define a weapon. Divine, the black-streaked blonde summarized for her. Yes, divine, that's the word. Where did you get it? She asked, wondering where he could find something like it. Minus it looking spooky, of course. Naruto seriously didn't want to answer that, because frankly he didn't have an answer for it. So at the risk of looking like an asshole, he quickly changed the subject. Wait, what time is it? He asked randomly. It's 12:53. Lee answered, looking up at the position of the sun. A horrified look crossed Naruto's masked features. How he did that no one would know. Realizing that he was late to turn in his report, he panicked. Shit, the Hokage is gonna kill me. Sorry guys, I gotta run. Let's do this again sometime, bye. With that quickly formed sentence said, he sped off in the direction of the Hokage Tower. Who was that guy? Tintin asked the two spandex-clad shinobi. That was none other than my good friend Naruto Uzumaki. Lee bellowed out excitedly after hearing that the black-streaked blonde would train with him again. Yash! Naruto-kun's flames of youth shine brightly. I cannot wait for his next visit. Guy screamed out after his student. Then after that, the two started screaming each other's names and went into their infamous scary-as-hell hug that somehow created their unbreakable genjutsu. Thankfully, their revelation about the stranger made Tintin's eyes widen in shock. That was Naruto? That tall, black-clothed, mysterious, muscular-scarred, mask-wearing, sword-wielding, black-streaked blonde. Was the hyperactive, orange-wearing blonde that always shouted that he would be Hokage during their academy days? What was going on here? Meanwhile, while this was happening, the most unpredictable person in Konoha was running like his life depended on it. The old man told him to at his office at noon, and he was almost an hour late. Seeing that he wasn't getting near it anytime soon on the ground, he jumped onto the roof. Pumping some chakra into his legs, he leaped higher and faster than he ever thought possible. It felt amazing, the wind blowing through his hair, the sense of freedom, and even the view. But unfortunately, all good things had to come to an end. Naruto landed onto the top of the Hokage Tower and was about to get down and enter through the front door, but realized the secretary, who always was a bitch to him, would try and turn him away. Unknowingly doing a Jiraiya action, he opened the window to the Sandame's office. That honestly did surprise the Sandame Hokage, so much that he fell out of his chair. Kami Naruto, you nearly gave me a heart attack. Sarutobi gasped out as he got to his feet. Looks like I'll have to try harder next time, old man. Naruto jokingly replied after he said that he reached into one of his back pouches and pulled out his report. The Sandame narrowed his eyes, seeing that he was late. While he let Naruto get away with a few things, being tardy was an issue for him. He only let Kakashi be tardy was because he was still carrying mental scars from the last Great War, and even then it gritted his patience. You're late, he simply stated. Not used being on the receiving end that one, Naruto merely scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, sorry about that. I was going to turn it in early, but I kind of ran into Guy and Lee. Sarutobi merely sighed at the mention of those two. He honestly wasn't surprised Naruto was late now. Those two were persuasive at times, especially Guy with that shiny hypo teeth jutsu of his. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. Now, if that is all dash. Actually, I was wondering if you could recommend a weapon and clothing store. As you can see, I kind of need it. Naruto interrupted the old Kage, indicating his torn and now more dirty clothing. Oh, of course. Sarutobi agreed with the former full blonde. Once he wrote down the address, he handed it to the person he thought as a grandson. Weapon shop a few minutes later. As Naruto stood outside the shop, he couldn't help but wonder if the Hokage was going senile. The shop, while it wasn't extravagant, it wasn't run down either. It was average. Sure, there were a few shingles missing and looked like it needed a new paint job, but other than that, it was in pretty good shape. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. Pushing open the door, Naruto saw the store was nothing flashy. There were no sale signs or advertising gimmicks, just rows of shelves and racks that had mostly darker colored clothing. The lighting was kind of dim, probably something wrong with the circuits, but the dressing rooms had bright fluorescent lighting so that people could see just how they looked in their new attire. But the weapons section was something completely different. Weapons of all shapes, sizes, and colors adorned the shelves of the store. And not only that, but they looked to be crafted tremendously well. If he didn't already have hand in Ryoku, he knew he would have bought one from this store. "Hello. Is there anything I can help you find, Shinobi-san?" Naruto turned around to face an imposing man at the cash register. He looked to be in his late 30s to early 40s with short, spiky chestnut brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard. The man was around 6'4" and muscular, indicating his years of work at the forge. He wore a dirty white t-shirt, dirty brown blacksmith gloves, and a dirty brown blacksmith apron, showing he was probably working on his latest masterpiece. But that was unfortunately all he could see, since his lower half was obscured by the counter. But if he was to guess, he was wearing sandals like everyone else, along with dirty pants of some color. However, what unnerved Naruto was the scarring on him. 2 deep scars went diagonally down his right cheek and into his beard, and there were also some deep to lighter scars on his exposed arms. This showed him his man was a shinobi who saw plenty of battles in his lifetime. "I said, can I help you, Dash?" The man opened his eyes, revealing them being dark brown, but they narrowed in hate at him. Growling in anger, he leaped over the counter, revealing dirted brown pants and sandals in the process, and attacked the black-streaked blonde. Naruto got on his guard and blocked a punch from the giant man. The punch numbed his left arm. If it wasn't for the bracer absorbing most of the punch, he wouldn't doubt that his arm would have been broken. This man was dangerous, and he knew he had to be very careful. Ducking another punch, Naruto took aim and hit him in the stomach. The man grunted a little bit, but showed no signs of being hurt in the slightest. In fact, it was the opposite for our hero, because his hand felt like he hit a rock. He felt trapped. He couldn't do any jutsu at this rage. His taijutsu was mainly brawling, and he could not unsheath his sword. Any thought he had on what to do was interrupted by a kick to his stomach that sent him through several racks, scattering the dark clothing all over the store and knocking the wind out of him. Growling angrily, the cashier walked over to him menacingly and pounded on the wall. From what Naruto could see, a part of the wall opened up, and the man casually pulled an axe from it. He saw the man drape it over his shoulder and saw the axe was sinister, almost demonic looking. The axe itself was around 3 feet in length, with a wickedly, yet beautifully obsidian serrated blade, the reverse of which was barbed and spiked, made to shred and tear. He didn't have to know that this man killed many people with it. The man roared in fury like a barbarian and jumped the full distance, intending on splitting his victim's head open. Naruto would not give him the satisfaction. Bringing his right hand to Ryoku's hilt, he unsheathed the magnificent blade and blocked the menacing axe head. The two struggled for dominance, both in a deadlock. Grunting in frustration, the cashier spoke. "You're strong for your size, berserker scum, but I'm going to kill you." "I'm not a Dash," Naruto protested. "Don't you dare lie to me. I'll Dash." He didn't get to finish because of a shattering sound, and then he fell on the floor, completely unconscious. "Dad, you stupid idiot, look what you've done!" a feminine voice screamed at him. Groaning a little, Naruto looked up from the cashier's unconscious body to see the familiar form of Tenten, with a broken vase in her hand. "Tenten," he asked, still trying to regain his breath. "Naruto, oh my Kami, are you all right?" Tenten exclaimed, reaching down, dropping what was left of the vase, and lifted him to his feet. Coughing a few times, the secret Kurashigan user regained his breath. "Yeah, I've endured worse, but what the hell was that about?" Sighing, the bun-haired girl answered. "My dad suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. During the last war, he was nearly killed by a berserker. He won, but was forced to retire because of his wounds. Since then, he has sudden war flashbacks from time to time. You were unfortunately the target because of..." Naruto knew what she was talking about. While the clothes were surprisingly comfy, they weren't exactly the best choice to wear in the village. "Tenten, what unyawfulness has happened here?" Guy's familiar voice screamed out, causing the two conscious teens to groan. "It's nothing, Guy-sensei. Dad just had a nasty flashback after seeing Naruto's outfit," Tenten replied. "Which I'm going to change out of." Naruto announced as he picked up a random set of clothing and went into the changing room. A few minutes later, the black-streaked blonde walked out, and immediately sweat dropped when he saw Tenten ordering the three males to work. She had a whip in her hands, lashing at her dad, sensei, and teammate. He could only stare in disbelief as the shop was spick and span a minute later. Right then and there, he made a mental note to not piss Tenten off any time in the future. Okay, dear, the store's cleaned up, and I locked Shiketsu, Bleeder, back up again. Now, can you please put the scary whip away? Tenten's dad begged as she kept making those accursed cracking sounds. I will once you apologize to Naruto, she snapped back at him. There's no need. I'm the one who set him off, Naruto said, trying to defuse the situation, which scared him dearly. Never piss off a woman, folks. It never ends well. The three turned around and were stunned to see him in his new outfit. His new outfit consisted of a pair of black cargo pants with a black kunai holster strapped to his right thigh, and a black vest with several pouches for scrolls in the front of it. He was still wearing his black sandals and ankle bands. Underneath the vest, he wore steel fishnet chainmail armor that came around his biceps. Over his forearms, he still wore the Shodaime Tsuchikage knot that they knew who they once belonged to black lightweight guards, with his clawed hands that were now covered by fingerless gloves with steel plates on the back of them and around each knuckle. Around his waist was a black belt that now held his hitayate as a belt buckle, and the two brown shuriken pouches attached to the back of his hips. Strapped to his left side was his beautifully made katana. However, still on his face was that damned mask that still made Tenten's dad's blood boil. Hiroshi, calmed down, Guy said, putting his hand on the man's shoulder. The man only sighed and visibly calmed himself. Kid, I'm sorry I attacked you, but I must ask that you please take that mask off. Naruto's eyes widened when he was asked that. Mentally, he was panicking, wondering what he should do. Even with his improved mind, he found no way to get out of this one. Go ahead, take it off, and if they ask, just bullshit them on your mission. That sounds reasonable. And make sure to buy a half mask once you show them, Shinigami ordered, in almost a yawning voice. Now, either the god of death overslept or was a lazy bastard in general. Naruto would figure out later, though he expected it to be both. He only sighed in response and responded, Are you sure? It's not a pretty sight, he said to the four. Hiroshi only gave him a scowl indicating that it was his way or the highway. Sighing, he took off his mask, drawing horrified gasps out of them. His face was chiseled, which would normally make a girl blush, but his left side completely ruined it. He had a deep cut going across half of his face, along with one going horizontally down his left eye that ended above his jaw, and 5 deep cuts on his left cheek, obscuring his whisker marks. Then there was a light line going across his forehead indicating that his juggin eye was sleeping. Thankfully, in his opinion, that made it look like another scar. Along with his coldish blue eyes, he looked like a seasoned warrior. Holy shit, kid, what happened to you? Hiroshi questioned the scarred, black-streaked blonde. It looks like you fought an entire army. He continued, indicating the other scars on his body. Naruto only scratched the back of his head. Well, I kinda did. You see, during my last mission, I met some misfortune with some stone neens. And while my former clothes, mask, and these scars are the result from it. Guy and Hiroshi visibly frowned hearing that. They fully knew Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki and saw that any injuries that he suffered healed completely. But whatever happened to him must have been horrific to make him look like a Biki. Guy would have to speak with the Hokage about it later, while Hiroshi could only ponder since he was retired and really couldn't do anything about it. Meanwhile, Lee and Tenten were horrified that a person only a year younger than them went through all that. They had a few close calls themselves and experienced their first kill during a mission gone wrong. But what he went through was something they just couldn't comprehend. How many? Tenten asked in a slightly scared voice. 15, maybe 20, possibly more. It's all a blur, really. Naruto answered her from what he wrote in his report. A pregnant silence filled the air. No one spoke in what seemed like hours. Clearing his throat, Naruto broke the silence. So how much? Slightly shaking out of his funk, Hiroshi spoke up. For 5 sets, plus a mask, it comes up to 997 Ryo and 50 Ryo cents, he said, knowing that he would be needing one. Ouch, that was pricey, but Naruto picked out a black half mask that covered his face from the nose down, for more pairs of clothing and pulled out his trusty wallet Gamachan. Before paying the man up front, he realized that he needed some new supplies. "I also need some supplies," he said to Hiroshi, noticing he was limping a little. Getting behind the counter, Hiroshi brought up his walking stick, silently cursing at the long, dead berserker who shattered his right leg. He looked up at the black-streaked blonde. "What do you need?" Not missing a beat, he answered, "I need a set of kunai knives, a dozen exploding and flashbang tags, 2 dozen makabishi, some soldier and blood pills, a sword cleaning kit, and a set of shuriken." Nodding, Hiroshi brought his hands under the counter and brought out his order. Naruto, however, furrowed his eyebrows, seeing the shuriken. The 4-sided was okay, but the 8-sided had more speed and sides to damage a person with. Hiroshi saw that look and frowned, not liking that look at all. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, it's the shurikens, I was wondering." He trailed off and reached into his right pouch behind him and brought out one of the 8-sided shuriken, placing on the counter, "If you could make this." Tintin was absolutely stunned, seeing a stone weapon up close, and grimaced seeing the look on her father's face. She knew anything involving Stone Country really got under his skin, whether it be their politics, shinobi, the war in general, and most importantly, their weapons. She knew that he could attest to the damage they could inflict. After all, it was because of a few well-placed shuriken hits that her father had to walk with a limp now. Guy and Lee stood on the sidelines preparing themselves to restrain the man, if necessary. "You want me to forge stone tools?" Hiroshi growled out, his eyes narrowing at the weapon. "I know you hate Iwagakure. I honestly can relate to you. But don't blame the weapon for your misfortune. A weapon is as deadly as the user. As a weaponsmith, you forge hundreds, if not thousands of weapons for the shinobi of a leaf." He then looked at him, his slitted eyes boring into his soul. "You, however, seem to have forgotten it's not the weapon who kills, but the person who uses it." With that said, he took 500 more Ryo, believing that was the asking price, and placed it on the counter, quickly bagged all his items, placed his half mask over his face before his Hanya mask, and left the store. No one did anything for several minutes. No one dared to say anything, how they were afraid to breathe. Finally, Hiroshi sighed and got to his feet. Looking at the shuriken for a few seconds, he picked it up and went to the forge. "Dad, you're actually going to do it?" Tintin gasped out in surprise. How could you blame her? Never in her life did she think her dad would ever forge anything created in stone. But Naruto somehow convinced him to do just that. Letting out a defeated sigh, Hiroshi turned to his daughter. That young man had the balls to say something that was so plainly obvious. Yet I've been too damn stubborn to listen. He then grumbled about stupid idiots and something about kicking his own ass before disappearing into the forge. Unknown to them, this event would forever change this shop. Not bad, Naruto, though I personally would have said something more memorable, but not bad. Shinigami commented his avatar. It doesn't matter what I said, I got what I wanted. Naruto replied before taking a breath. How the hell does Kakashi wear these things? They're almost impossible to breathe with them on. Years of practice is my guess. Kyuubi shrugged, not really getting the one-eyed ninja's fashion sense. Whatever, the Kurashigan user replied. After minutes of aimless walking, Naruto pondered on what to do. His team had the week off, and he couldn't do any just to training without drawing attention. Maybe he could bond with Sasuke. Now it was too soon. He was still getting used to the fact he was a Uchiha. Sakura was definitely out of the question. Kakashi, while he respected the man, he couldn't really communicate with him on any level. Maybe hanging with the other teams was something he could do. He honestly missed Shikamaru, Choji, and Kiba. Maybe they could hang out sometime during the week. Any other thoughts were literally slapped out of his head. What the hell was that for? He shouted at the fox in his head. Instead of thinking about your social life, you need to concentrate on your training. Kyuubi roared at his vessel. Listen, just because dash. You got your ass kicked by a cripple on an adrenaline rush. While I respect you for keeping your cool and defending yourself, you still need more practice. From what I could see, there were a dozen potential strategies in that fight. Now what you need to do is study strategy, go to that fucking library, and learn a thing or two. Shinigami imputed his opinion. But Dash, I know your teammate's mom owned the library, but so does her sister. There's a 50-50 chance there. But for Pete's sake, you're a shinobi. Use that damn transformation jutsu to hide yourself, if you have to. Use that fucking improved brain I gave you. Hearing that, Naruto mentally palmed himself, of course. His chakra control was way better than it was before, so he could do that without any difficulty now. Smirking under his mask, he created a shadow clone to take his stuff back and to provide extra protection for his place. After his clone, Lefty had to restrain himself from skipping to the library for two reasons. One, it was unmanly to skip, and Kyuubi would mentally kick his ass if he did. And two, his right leg stung a little. Thanks to Handen Ryoku's creators, he couldn't sheath it without drawing blood. He honestly tried to sheath it, but it was being too damn stubborn. So he cut his right leg and had Kyuubi heal it while he was changing. Of course, after he did that, he wanted to beam himself with a blunt object, because he could have simply used his thumb. It was just as Ishikawa told him, look back to the past and learn from past mistakes. That was a lesson that would really come in handy in the future. But now he was heading towards the library. Not knowing this would change his views on his grandfather figure. The library, an infinite place of knowledge and wisdom, a sanctum for those who want to learn, and a place of dread for idiots. Either way, it held a lot of good and bad memories for Naruto. After creating a shadow clone, and had it use the transformation jutsu to turn into a brown-haired, brown-eyed teenager, he then told it to go inside to see who was working. After 15 minutes of waiting in the shadows, he saw him stroll out. After waiting a few more minutes for him to go into a random ally and disappear, he grinned after receiving the information of who was working and a few books that he needed to read. Taking a deep breath, he casually strolled in and saw the two who taught him most of the things he was denied as a child. His blue eyes settled on the taller of the two, Akira Haruno, Sakura's aunt. She was a very beautiful woman, with long, deep pink hair that flowed down her back like the waves of an ocean, fair skin, and beautiful green eyes. Standing at 5'6", she was around the average height for a woman her age and a little taller than him by a few inches. At the age of 40, she still had the figure she had when she was in her early 20s. He remembered seeing her picture once before when they invited him into their home that was always sought after. And best of all, she was quiet. And when she did speak, it was with a soft yet strong voice that commanded attention no matter what the volume. And then he set his eyes on the youngest, Sakari Haruno, Sakura's sister. Unlike her sister, she had short, shoulder-length pink hair, fair skin, and jade green eyes. She stood around 5'4", but Naruto knew she would grow a little taller. After all, she was only 14. And unlike her sister, she actually had a curvy figure and B-cup breasts, due to the right dieting, and he knew from experience that she was much nicer than his teammate. He knew a lot about the two standing before him, and they knew almost everything about him. Akira was the unfortunate sister of Hibari Haruno, the mother of both Sakura and Sakari. Hibari was the exact opposite of Akira. She was overweight and tall, flat-chested, lazy, haughty, shrewd, used too much makeup to cover the ugly face, arrogant, and oftentimes had to shout to be heard. It sickened him to know and that he used to think she was pretty, but that was because she was a washed-out genin and used the transformation jutsu to make herself look desirable in public. And once he saw her true form, secretly of course, he honestly couldn't eat a thing for a week for fear that would come up on him. Naruto knew both Haruno's sisters were married, both being the exact opposite of each other, of course. While married, Akira, unfortunately, was unable to produce life, but her devoting husband, Kurega, stayed by her through thick and thin. Her sister's husband, Kusabi, however, was a sex hound that cheated whenever he found the chance, not that he could blame him, of course. That was where Sakari came in. She was rescued. I say rescued because her bitch of a former mother abandoned her in a dumpster. If it wasn't for Akira's sneaking suspicion that her sister would pull something like that, he could only shudder thinking of how he could have turned out without their combined guidance. Anyways, after she was taken home, she was officially adopted with the Hokage's signature to make it official. Naruto knew that Sakari knew she was adopted, but he knew that she didn't care. As far as she was concerned, Kurega and Akira were her real parents. He would have reminisced further, but the two women turned towards them. Smiling behind his masks, he waved to them, Akari-chan, Sakuri-chan, long time no see. Raising her delicate pink eyebrow, Akari replied to him, I'm sorry, sir, but I honestly don't know who you are. Stifling a chuckle, Naruto responded, "Well, of course you don't recognize me. After all, I am the most unpredictable person you've ever met." "Naruto, is it you?" Sakari gasped out, seeing his completely changed appearance. "The one and only," he responded. "My goodness, what on earth happened to you?" Akira asked, coming closer to see if her eyes were deceiving her. "It happened on my last mission. Don't worry, I'm Dash." Any other words he would have said were muffled when he was pulled into a bone-breaking hug by Sakari. The sight made the god of death sweat drop. How the hell did that happen? For a civilian, she sure has Chunin-level speed. Geez, every time I think I figure them out, mortals continue to amaze me. However, it was a different experience for the black-streaked blonde. While it was nice to feel the warmth of another person, it wasn't the best to feel his back breaking under Sakari's illogical strength. "Sakari, I think Naruto-kun has been through enough," Akari said, inwardly smirking at her daughter's affection to the QB container. Blushing a little bit, Sakari released the former blonde and instantly apologized. Naruto only rubbed his back, feeling it pop back into place thanks to QB. No, it's quite all right. It's not every day something like this happens." "What exactly happened?" Sakari asked after she brought her blush down. Mentally sighing that he had to lie to two of the people he trusted most, he told them what happened. His encounter with the Demon Brothers, Zabuza, his training with Kakashi, and his death. Two women could only stare in horror when he unbuckled his vest and showed them the wound he received from Kakashi through his fishnet chainmail shirt. And with bitter reluctance, he recalled his vivid experience in Stone Country, saying that they brought him back to life, experimented on his body, his escape, and his horrendous wounds. Showing that he meant it, he took off his Hanya mask and pulled down his half-mask to show his scarred face. Before his tale ended, he found his face buried between both the woman's breasts. Both Kyubi and Shinigami laughed at the lucky bastard, seeing him struggling to breathe. "Oh, Naruto-kun, we're so sorry that happened to you." Sakari nearly sobbed out after hearing the preteen story. "I can't even imagine the pain you went through." Akari continued for her daughter. As the blonde struggled to breathe, he heard a distinct laughter behind him. "Naruto, not only are the talk of the village, but you're also seducing the two women in my life." The two women blushed in reply to the voice and broke apart embarrassed. After coughing a few times, Naruto turned to see who the voice belonged to. A man standing at 5'10" was smirking at him. He wore his smooth brown hair in a ponytail like Iruka's that matched his brown eyes, which were hidden behind some black wire-framed glasses. Crossing his arms over his chest, the former full blonde noticed he wore a dark blue turtleneck sweater over a light blue Yakuta robe with a leather briefcase hanging over his shoulder. And below him, he wore tan pants along with brown, open-toed sandals. "Kurege, it's been far too long." Naruto greeted Akari's husband. "Same here, it's been nearly 3 months," the joking man responded. "Meh, give or take 3 months," the black-streaked blonde replied. "So did you just get back from the tower?" "Oh yes, the Hokage unfortunately didn't have too much work for me. He just told me to bring my work home. And on the way there, I decided to check up on 2 gorgeous women in the library." He then smirked, looking at him. "And this is where I find you, you little player." Naruto could only give a stiff chuckle. He knew the man well enough to know he was pulling his leg. While both the Haruno women just sighed at the man's antics. While they love him to death, he could sometimes be very immature. However, his joking visage instantly disappeared, setting into serious mode, as he called it. "I see that the reports were true. You have changed a lot since that mission," the brunette said, making the air seem thick around him. "You know already?" the secret Kurashigan user asked, sincerely surprised that information got out so fast. Kurege just tapped his head with his right index finger. "No, I briefly saw it and remembered every detail. Remember, I'm the one who taught you how to easily remember things." Naruto couldn't hold back a shudder. The man was a joker and sarcastic asshole at times. But he swore that he had some Nara blood in him if his knowledge and photographic memory was any indication. "Honey, if you're done scaring Naruto-kun, I believe he came here for a reason," Akari stated, her soft but powerful voice breaking her husband out of his serious state. Seeing his scratch his cheek sheepishly at going overboard again, the kind woman spoke to the black-streaked blonde. "Now what do you need exactly?" "Akari-chan, these are the books I'll be needing for the day." Naruto replied before listing them off. The latest book on the history of the Shinobi Nations, if you have it. A book that has anything to do with plants and strategy for dummies, he said while mentally cursing the fox and God respectfully, if their snickering was any indication to their cruel teaching methods. Blinking in surprise at the unusual books, the two women calmly went to the selected books he requested. And 5 minutes later they came back with two books, one being big, old, and heavy if Akari's struggling was any indication, while the other one was smaller and brand new. Panting a bit, Akari settled it on the wooden desk while Sakari checked them out. Sorry, but we don't have any books for plants, but you might have better luck at the Yamanaka flower shop, Akari said after she caught her breath. Inwardly, Naruto seethed hearing that he would have to go there. While the Yamanakas weren't particularly cruel to him, they weren't the most helpful neither. He remembered Inochi, who was mentioned by Shikamaru's dad, once treated him neutrally for the most part, but his wife was a bitch, and Ino's treatment towards him in the academy was still fresh in his mind. Nodding reluctantly, he packed his books under his arm with ease and slipped both his masks on. Thank you, as always. I'll see you again soon. The preteen thanked them before heading out the door. If he looked back, he would have seen Sakari's worried expression. Once he got out to the library, the black-streaked blonde jumped on the roof and created a shadow clone to take the books back. While it was lazy of him, he clearly admitted to himself he would need both hands for his next task. Because he clearly didn't know who was manning the shop that day. It could have been Inochi, his wife, or Shinigami forbid Ino. After sending his clone back to his apartment, he headed off to the Yamanaka flower shop. Nearly 5 minutes later, he arrived at the flower shop. It honestly wasn't hard to find, with its walls being painted yellow, its orange roof, two giant glass windows between a giant door that was always open during the day, along with various plants on the outside of the shop, and the giant pink sign that spelled out Yamanaka Flower Shop in big red bold letters. What a fruity shop. Kyubi shared his thoughts to the other two. Oh yeah, Naruto thought to the great beast. Damn right, Shinigami agreed. I'm no building expert, but shouldn't the man of the house get the final say in the design? He's obviously whipped. Both the Demon Lord and God of Death said in a union. Now quit stalling and enter the damn shop. You have a lot of work to do. Sighing behind his two masks, the preteen reluctantly took a step forward, and a few strides later, he entered the shop. Just like the outside, all fruity and full of plants, the inside was no better. It was yellow like their traditional blonde hair, and had shelves full of beautiful flowers. Seeing that no one was at the counter, Naruto rung the bell for service. When no one came a minute later, her rung it again several times. I'm coming, a woman's voice screamed out. Oh fuck, all three of them screamed inside their heads. They had a reason to swear, because barely a few seconds later out stumbled a girl around Naruto's age. She looked exactly the same since he saw her the last time. The same pupil-less blue eyes, the same long blonde hair, always seen in a ponytail with long bangs covering the right side of her face, and always wearing that revealing purple outfit with white training tape wrapped around her stomach and thighs. The only thing different about her was that she was wearing the shop's yellow apron, had her white arm warmers rolled up, and had both her ears pierced. What do you want? I was busy, Dash. The blonde-haired girl then took a look at the customer's face before letting out an ear-shattering scream. You know what's going on? A male voice hollered out. Looking where the voice came from, a man emerged from the other side of the store. He stood around 5'9" and looked to be around in his late 30s. His hair was blonde like Ino's, only darker in contrast with a mullet-style haircut with his hair being shorter on the top, finishing in a long ponytail. He also had bright blue eyes with the pupil unlike Ino. He was wearing the standard green Jounin flak jacket over a black outfit complete with tan handguards and a sleeveless red coat that reached to the back of his knees. He was Inochi Yamanaka, the father of Ino. What is going on here? He demanded, seeing his daughter shivering on the floor. Ino whimpered out as she closed her eyes in fear. Looking up, Inochi saw the so-called demon. His face automatically went into a scowl, seeing the mask. He, like many other Leaf shinobi, knew the horrors of the Third Great Shinobi War, and that mask made even the mightiest warrior want to retreat at the sight of it. However, he looked the figure over and saw that he was no older than Ino. He had nothing that identified himself as a stone shinobi, and most importantly, he saw the leaf Hitayate on his belt. Go to your room. I'll deal with this, he told her. Seeing she didn't have to be told twice, the Genin sprinted away and locked herself into her room. Seeing her daughter safe and sound, Inochi looked back at the figure and stared at him with his piercing gaze that showed years of shinobi experience. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Just a shinobi seeking to buy a book," Naruto cryptically answered him. "You scared my daughter," Inochi stated, clenching his fist. "That was unintentional," the Blackstreak blonde said, mentally adding, not in his head, "I just want a book listed with various plants that I can create creams and poisons with." Nodding, the Yamanaka clan head turned away and went into the back room. Emerging a few minutes later, he brought out a medium-sized green book and what looked like a mixing kit. Gently setting them on the counter, he rung them up on the cash register. "The total is 400 ryo," Inochi said, again visibly flinching at how expensive the day was getting for him. Naruto paid the man, leaving him with more than enough to get by until his next mission, thanked him for his kindness to leave a good impression, took his stuff, and left. Inochi only breathed in a sigh of relief once he left. "You really are the #1 surprising ninja." Once he got his needed items, Naruto headed towards his apartment. After that tense encounter in the Yamanaka business, he needed the rest of the day to relax and read up on the things he ignored and was denied during his academy years. With a small push of chakra, he leaped into the air again and relished the wind flowing through his hair. Oh, what a feeling it was. Shinigami once compared it to riding a motorcycle with your helmet off, whatever the hell that was, and he agreed that the feeling was enjoyable. That was about the time he felt himself land on his roof. He then walked a few steps towards the edge of the roof before lightly jumping onto the floor. He winced a bit, hearing the horrible creaking sound as his feet connected with the worn wood. Steeling himself as he stood to his full height, he went to his door that the owner graciously assigned as apartment 666 and opened it. He smiled, seeing that both Ichigo and Benaheim were still asleep on his bed, and that his 4 clones were standing guard over them. "All right, guys, it's time to get to work." He then pointed towards the nearest clone and talked to him about his most recent purchase. "I want you to start reading up on the poisonous and healing plants. Get through at least 5 chapters. Read more if you find it interesting." He then proceeded to set the mixing kit onto a shabby table and tossed him the book. "What about us, boss?" one of his clones asked. "I want you to study up on the strategy book. Pay close attention so you don't miss anything," Naruto said before turning to the other 2 clones. "And I want you two to practice the kunai balancing. Don't worry about the water. Just balance them as long as you can." "And what about you, boss?" another clone asked the original. "I'll be reading that giant history book. Now get moving," he responded before taking the gigantic book and went to lay on his bed. Hours went by, and Naruto found it to be more productive than Iruka's lessons combined. His first clone dispelled 3 hours ago, and he learned about a few plants that could close up wounds in an instant, which oddly enough reminded him of Ikiku's healing ointment from the Bleach manga, and also leaned about a plant that could kill a man in less than a second. He would get to practicing making them at another time. Right now, he was finishing up Stone Country's history. "While I'm impressed that Stone Country has an interesting history," Naruto mused to himself as he finished off the last sentence. "Now, why did you read up Stone first?" QB asked, honestly confused that his vessel read up on his enemy's country. "I owe it to Ishikawa. He taught me the most important lesson I would have never learned here." He then closed his eyes, remembering his fight with the deceased Stone Chunin. "I feel honored." A voice rang out, causing Naruto to leap up and Ichigo to spring into action. The Fox Kit leaped at the voice only to fly off the bed and land in the laundry basket. "What the hell? Who's there?" the Blackstreak blonde demanded, pulling out one of his new kunai. "Oh, come on, Blondie. I haven't been dead for even a month. And I've already been forgotten?" the voice replied, causing Naruto's eyes to widen. "Ishikawa Kamizuru?" he asked. "Yep, that's my name. Don't wear it out," the now identified Ishikawa replied, appearing in front of his killer. Naruto was just flabbergasted seeing the Stone Chunin again. He was more healthy than when they first met. His body was fuller, like he actually ate, and much more powerful looking as well. Instead of seeing his cold brown eyes, they were now filled with inner peace along with the laziness of a slacker. No way, no fucking way, you're supposed to be dead, the officially freaked preteen screamed out. Ishikawa only laughed seeing his reaction. Relax, Blondie, I am dead, and I'm here to wreak my horrible vengeance, mahaha. He crackled evilly as his face became demonic as Yami himself. The ghost descended on the Kurashigan user, effectively making him roll out of the way as the spirit phased through the bed. Ichigo managed to crawl out of the clothes hamper and lunged at the ghost once again, but the poor kit phased through him, hitting the wall. While Benaheim sprinted to see if her brother was okay, Naruto forced some chakra into his eyes, activating his Kurashigan behind his mask. Ishikawa only hissed and rushed at him as if intending to possess him. Naruto was ready to somehow deal with the vengeful specter, but instead the Deadstone Chunin stopped in front of him and blew him a raspberry. Just fucking with ya. Ishikawa smirked at the freaked-out kid before crossing his arms. What the hell was that for you, asshole? Naruto bellowed at him. Geez, kid, lighten up. I was only having some fun. I mean, being dead is super boring. You gotta pass the time somehow. The spirit replied. Why are you here anyways? I thought you were sent to the afterlife after I killed you. The black-streaked blonde demanded. Well, you see. Flashback. All right, Kaiza, everything is set. Step to your right, and heaven awaits you. Again, I am so sorry for the wait. Shinigami told the fisherman. Smiling happily, the hero of Wave thanked the god of death and went to the right. As the pearly white doors opened, he was enveloped in a warm ray of light and disappeared into his brother Kami's realm. All right, next. Shinigami ordered over his stacks of paperwork on his black marble desk that held many mechanisms, and cursing himself for falling behind on his work. The next time Susanoo, Cupid, Fujin, and Raijin told him to take a break and relax, he'd better make sure it wasn't for an entire year. The barrier that separated Kaiza disappeared, and the next person was a short, pudgy man with wild gray hair. And behind him was an army of 500 mercenaries. All of them were deathly pale and looked like they would shit themselves if they had anything to shit out. Gato, your life has been revolved around greed, lust, and envy. You've enslaved hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent women and children, selling them in underground sex trafficking after raping them. Also, you've sold nearly 500 million pounds of drugs, murdered various business rivals and their families, along with other innocent people, and most recently tried to take over Wave Country for a private island of all things. Shinigami narrowed his already hate-filled eyes at the mercenaries, and you 500 are no better. The list of your crimes are staggering. But Lord Shinigami, Gato tried to plead with the mighty god, only for him to be blown in half by his sheer power and reformed again. I will not hear your excuses, you pitiful mortals. You all had a choice for doing good in your life, but you went and fucked it up. The god then gave him a big evil grin that was partially obscured by the dagger between his teeth. Enjoy your time in hell. He then brought his hand to a lever beside him and pulled it down. Almost immediately the floor below them opened up, and all 501 men fell screaming into the fiery pits of hell. Shinigami smiled, hearing their screams of pain as the fire burned them, and for once he was glad to hear his other brother, Yami's voice roar in cruel laughter. Pulling the gate shut, Shinigami ordered the next pair to come in, and mentally sighed in relief that a quarter of his work for Wave Country was completed in that instant. That just left roughly 55.3 people left for every other country. But once he set his eyes on the pair, he narrowed them and pulled out their papers. Muka no name. You were born an orphan and graduated at the academy at the age of 18, 3 years above the normal standards. Through the years, you made no attempts to train, always failed at the easiest tasks, was booted from 10 genin teams, failed to complete the Chunin exams several times, and you didn't even kill anyone until you finally grew some balls to kill your helpless teammates who just graduated from the academy for barely a week in their sleep, and the Jounin sensei, when he was dead tired, even put up a fight due to severe insomnia and constant fights with his wife. For the next few months, you killed several innocent men before raping their wives, girlfriends, and even their daughters of all ages. And after you were finished, you slit their throats. Shinigami didn't say anymore, seeing the man was guilty beyond all reason. He just pushed a button at his desk, and Muka fell screaming into the fiery pits of hell. Now Ishikawa Kemizuru, you were the third son of Kai and Iburai Kemizuru, and named after your great-grandfather, the Shodaime Tsuchikage. You were a model sibling to your little sister, graduated the IWA Academy at the age of 10, spent a few years out in the wilderness to perfect your clan's arts and to communicate with nature. You returned at the age of 14 and became Chunin a few months later by literally wiping the floor with the competition. From the age of 15 to 19, you killed approximately 800 people in the line of duty, earning your nickname, the Killer Hornet. But then you went rogue by stealing one of your country's most treasured items. For a few months after that, you literally starved yourself from lack of food, even though you could clearly hunt, until you met with that bumbling idiot, and was finally killed by one Naruto Uzumaki. That is correct, Ishikawa said, his voice showing no denial in his life story. Now the Dead Stone Ninja expected to be sent to hell like his companion, but instead the god in front of him placed his mighty hand on his chin. And what's more, he made a humming sound like he was thinking. After a few suspenseful minutes, Shinigami spoke to him. Ishikawa, your soul is tainted, but from what I sense, you aren't evil like the other souls I've damned over my entire lifetime. What are you getting at? The clearly confused Stone Chunin asked. Due to this unusual circumstance, I can't send you to either heaven or hell. Your soul is completely on the ground between good and evil. Seeing Ishikawa's look that bordered on confusion and disbelief, Shinigami had to think again. He would never admit it, but this was the first time this happened. For a second, he thought what his family would do, but quickly dismissed those thoughts. Yami would send him to hell. His stuck-up brother Kami would also send him to hell. His mother Destiny and his father Creation would also send him to hell as well. Smirking in a way that suited him, along with a way to spite his family, the god of death knew exactly what to do. Ishikawa, Kamizuru, I have a deal for you. Do you accept? Do I have a choice? Ishikawa asked. Unless you would rather be dragged to hell or eaten by me, Shinigami casually replied, sending a shiver down the spirit's spine. I'll accept. What will you have me do, Lord Shinigami? The god of death smirked before telling him his plan. Tell me, do you remember Naruto Uzumaki? So Shinigami told me that I have to shadow you, so to speak, and guide you through life, and, well, I zoned out once he rambled on about stuff. Ishikawa said to his stunned killer. Shinigami actually told you to do that. Naruto asked him. Yep. And you didn't tell me why? He shouted at the ceiling. I wanted it to be a surprise. Shinigami simply replied. Geez, you could have given me a heads up. You scare the hell out of me and the kids. Naruto retorted, picking both Ichigo and Benaheim off the ground and brought them back on the bed. I thought it was entertaining. Kyuubi added his 2 cents. Up yours, Fuzzy, the black-streaked blonde retorted before realizing that he said that in front of Ishikawa. Oh, relax, Blondie, Shinigami already told me about the fox inside you and the blood in your veins. I honestly don't care. How you remind me of Han, only less hate-filled. The dead Kamizuru said, calming the Jinchuriki, but also confusing him. Yes, Han. He's Stone's current Jinchuriki after Rashi left to better master his beast's powers dash. Wait a second, Naruto said, stopping the spirit from continuing. Wait a damn second. He then went over to the book again and went to the index. Scanning from A to J, he found the section he was looking for. Quickly flipping through the pages, he finally got to the end of the book where there was only 1 page left. Jinchuriki, he read out, surprising those in hearing range. The Jinchuriki are humans that have a tailed beast sealed within them. They exhibit extraordinary powers, and in some cases are more powerful than their tailed beasts, because they have the intelligence to use the beast's powers effectively. For the past 100 years, after Hashirama Senju gained control of several tailed beasts, he spread these beasts to other, newly formed villages in an attempt to maintain peace and equalize the powers between the nations. In order to prevent the Jinchuriki from turning traitor, it is tradition for the host to be selected from the family of the village's own Kage. In this way, the Jinchuriki not only has strong ties of loyalty to village and their leader, but they also serve to show off the Kage's might. Naruto slowly set the book down, realizing what he just read. He now knew who exactly his father was thanks to this book. Slowly, he stood onto the floor of his apartment and turned to his 3 remaining clones who stopped once the commotion started. "Stay here and guard the kits. I'll be back soon," he ordered before picking up his sword and weaponry. Without a word, he stepped out of the door and marched off to the Sandame's office, fully ready to raise some unholy hell on the old man. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed in relief. He entwined his hand together, bent them around so they weren't facing him, and pulled. The resounding crack of his fingers brought the old man a little relief to his old bones and a feeling of accomplishment as well. For the first time since he got reinstated to be Hokage, he dealt with half of his paperwork load in a single day. Sighing in relief, he brought his hands back and they went to his upper right-hand drawer. Nearly a second later, he brought out his Ica Paradise book and brought his trusty pipe out of his long sleeve. Bringing the pipe to his mouth, he filled it with its rich tobacco and lit it with a minor fire jutsu he created a long time ago. Taking a few puffs, he inhaled the sweet nicotine that filled his lungs. He sighed in relaxation and brought his book up to read its dirty context. It was a joyful moment in Hiruzen Sarutobi's opinion, and nothing could change it. Oh, how wrong he was. "Go away, you little brat. The Hokage is busy," he heard his secretary scream out. "What's going on? She doesn't normally yell at kids. Probably that time of the month again." Sarutobi thought to himself before going back to his book, but several dozen loud, stomping noises coming upwards was making that extremely difficult. "Move it, you bitch. I have to see him now," a disrespectful voice shouted at her. "So it's Naruto. I wonder what he wants." "I don't care. Lord Hokage has no need to see a little demo dash." She was cut off when she suddenly came crashing through the door, surprising the Hokage and making him drop his book on the desk. Moaning in pain, the woman fell unconscious, and Naruto stepped through the ruins of a shattered door. From his entrance, Sarutobi was surprised at his choice of clothing, but he filed that away for later when he saw his surrogate grandson stride into his office. The way the black-streaked blonde was walking, the Hokage didn't doubt that he was mad, no beyond mad. He was furious. Slamming his hands onto the oak desk, Naruto stared long and hard at the old man he used to call grandfather. He wanted to tear into the old man with his claws for lying to him for nearly 13 years of his life. But despite his old age, Sarutobi could kick his ass, so instead he was going to hurt the man another way. "Sarutobi, you have some serious explaining to do," Naruto bluntly said, smirking eagerly when the old man flinched as his name was spat with venom. "What do I have to explain, Naruto?" Sarutobi asked, trying to be as innocent as possible, though deep down he probably knew why he was so angry. "You need to explain why you've lied to me for 12 years, and I'm not leaving until I get my answers," the secret Kurashigan user said, drawing a frown on the man's face. "I have not lied, the old man started to say before he was struck with massive killing intent. "Bullshit, you know what I'm talking about. Didn't you tell me my father was the fucking Yondaime Hokage?" Naruto raged at the pathetic man he used to respect. Sighing tiredly, Sarutobi inhaled from his pipe one more time before setting it on his desk. Opening his eyes again, he stared long and hard at his surrogate grandson. He fully expected the preteen to back down like he usually did, but to his surprise, he didn't. He stood his ground, and his killing intent even increased somewhat. "How did you figure it out?" he asked, fully knowing that denying it was pointless now. "It is tradition for the Jinchuriki host to be selected from the family of the village's own Kage. I read that in a book and came to 2 conclusions. Either I was related to the Yondaime from a relative, or someone from the Senju clan, or someone from your family. But since I have no blood relation to you, or the founding Kages, I can only conclude that I am his son. And taking a look in the mirror, I look almost exactly like him. Plus, other than the Yamanakas, he's the only person who ever had blonde hair in this village." Naruto said to the old man, "There was no need to beat around the bush in this discussion. Naruto, I did it to protect you from a Wagakure. They are still very hostile towards the Yondaime. And after Kyuubi attacked, there was no way we could defend ourselves from another invasion." The Sandaime tried to explain, but apparently Naruto wanted to hear none of it. "I once told you what I hated most, and what was that?" he demanded. Sarutobi barely held in a wince when he said that. What was it? The black-streaked blonde demanded again. Liars, the Sandaime sighed out. And you told me that liars are scum. You said you would never lie to me, but you've been doing that for 12 years. Naruto said, digging his claws into the oaken desk with ease. Scum, he rasped out at him. What do you want me to do about it? Sarutobi finally snapped at him. I did it to keep you safe, to keep the village safe. I did everything to keep all of us safe. And you're going to demand something of me? Well, too bad, Naruto. I don't owe you a thing. You don't owe me anything? Naruto screamed at him. You owe me a lot of things, Sarutobi. I've fought, bled, sweat, and cried tears for this village. I have a fucking demon in my stomach to protect these ignorant bastards. And what do I get in return? Neglected, beaten, starved, ripped off, denied a childhood. I've even died for this village. I brought back the infamous demon of the mist, and a woman with a very rare bloodline. He took a few haggard breaths and took both his masks off, effectively making Sarutobi stiffen, seeing his once fiery blue eyes as cold as a glacier, along with his brutally scarred face, the closed juggin, I included, and realized he made a great mistake in saying he owed Naruto nothing, especially when his eyes morphed into the mutated Sharingan. I know what I am now, Sir Toby. Ironically, thanks to Wagakure, I realized who I am exactly. He peered his eyes into the old Kages, almost into a hypnotizing stare. I know that my mother was of Uchiha blood after I realized the truth when I stared into the mirror. And I know that my old man was a powerful ninja. Know this, Sarutobi, I'm not the weakling that anyone can push around anymore. And my loyalty is on the breaking point for this village. So what's stopping me from taking Zabuza and Haku away from this place that I love so much? He continued with a massive amount of sarcasm at the last part. You wouldn't. Hiruzen rebutted. Try me. After all, I'm the most unpredictable ninja in this village. I'm sure that Sam will welcome me. Maybe grass. Hell, with Kyuubi's power and Zabuza's training, we could take over Kirigakure in 1 or 2 years tops. Naruto replied, grinning his fox-like grin. And after I'm gone, Wave will surely catch wind and cut off their newly trade routes with you. And you'll be open to attack from any hostile nations when they learn that your Jinchuriki is gone. Weighing in the possibilities, Sarutobi measured that fact that Naruto was undying loyal to the village. But at the same time, he could very well leave and become a possible enemy. Narrowing his eyes at the decision, he was about to make the old man's side in defeat, because the risk was just too great. What do you want? Smirking that he was finally getting somewhere, Naruto answered him. I want 3 things, and 3 things only. Nodding sadly, the Hokage brought out agreement paper. First, I want the Demon Brothers out of the maximum security prison. They're to be placed with Zabuza and Haku with the same punishment of house arrest. He demanded, making Sarutobi's eyes widen at the outrageous demand. Naruto, are you serious? They are master assassins and would kill anyone in a heartbeat without a shred of remorse, the old Kage exclaimed. Exactly, Naruto simply stated. Seeing the professor's look, he made it easy to understand. While mocking him at the same time, they will take any job that involves killing their target. Plus, they are masters in poison creation, and they worked with Zabuza. So if you ask the man to make them cooperate, they'll probably work under you without much hesitation, he said to him very slowly, making the old man scowl at him. I'll do my best for that one. He managed to grit through his teeth, clearly not liking the fact he was getting talked down to by a genin of all things. Smirking again, seeing the Sandaime write down his request, he went for the second one. Second, I want full rights to my old family stuff. That is impossible right now, Naruto, Sarutobi said. Bringing a hand up, he stopped the Jinchuriki from speaking. The Yondaime created a very special seal for you, and you weren't to open it until you reached Chunin rank, and the same goes for your mother as well. The old man barely hid a smirk as he wrote down Naruto's wasted request. Narrowing his eyes that the old bastard got him when a juggin, I whispered something in his mind. What was that? He mentally asked the sentiment tool. I said the old fool isn't lying. And how do you know? And how are you talking when you are closed? I can read minds, you stupid ninjin, even when closed, and I can keep myself closed because now is not the time to reveal myself. Anyways, the old monkey isn't lying about this. He may have fooled you for 12 years. but he can't block his mind from me. Why are you helping me? I thought you said I'll help with you once you give me the respect I deserve. You made the Hokage bend to your will through words, guilt, and emotions. While it's not a big thing in my mind, it's good enough to help you for now. Don't think I'm doing this at the bottom of my heart. Deciding to not say what heart to the eyeball on his forehead, Naruto merely thanked it and sketched out the possibilities of what he could do with the Juggin eye on his side now. Seeing that the old man was done writing, he went in for the kill. And lastly, once I become a Chunin, I want it to be announced that the Yondaime was my father. I'm not afraid of assassins or anything. If they come for me, they'll return home in a body bag. If the Sandaime Hokage was drinking or eating something at that instant, he would have either started choking or spat it out. He tried to find the right words to protest it, but instead he stayed silent in order not to babble like an idiot. Finally, after 2 minutes, he only sighed. The guilt he felt over the years of lying to the boy was already getting to him. But now Naruto placed much more on it. He felt trapped, and his relationship with his surrogate grandson was on a very thin line at best, or completely shattered at worst. Sighing one last time, he wrote down the last demand. His old heart was becoming heavy with every word until it felt like iron when he finally put the period. Finally, he put the Hokage stamp on it, making it 100% official. Snatching it from the old man's hands, Naruto placed his mask back on, turned away, and didn't look back as he headed out the broken door. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed a very sorrowful sigh. He placed his hands on his head, feeling a major headache coming on. In the silence, he heard a small hissing noise. Opening his eyes, he saw an exploding tag where Naruto's right hand used to be. His eyes widening, he ducked under his desk, knowing that the desk could survive an exploding tag, which it did when a Cloud Assassin tried killing him during the Second Great Shinobi War. The explosion wasn't big. In fact, it was actually small, almost deliberately. Peeking his head from under it, he started sobbing, not just because he broke Naruto's trust, but also that his prized authorized first edition Ica Paradise book was destroyed, along with all his finished and unfinished paperwork, and his favorite pipe had to be repaired. Sighing, the Sandaime wiped away his tears, picked up his broken pipe, and left the office. He was going to call in some Chunin to take his assistant to the hospital and fix up his office. But in the meantime, he was going to take a well-needed break. After all, he had more things to do to make it up to Naruto, and it wasn't going to be easy. The next day was intense for our hero. After Sarutobi signed his demands, he went straight home and packed his stuff, stuffing his library books and clothing into Ishikawa's sealing scroll, making sure he had all his equipment on him, and making sure his stash of Bleach manga was secured in its secret hiding place that no one other than him could find. He picked up both Ichigo and Benaheim, placing them in his backpack, dispelled his clones, and headed off to the forest. Arriving to some sort of fenced area that said Area 44 Keep Out, Naruto only scoffed at it and jumped right over it. Immediately after going 100 feet in it, he was attacked by a giant tiger. Smiling under his masks, he fought and defeated the giant creature. He didn't kill it, but it sure was one hell of a good fight, especially when it was claws against claws. After giving the tiger 3 claw-like scars going down his right eye, the beast admitted defeat and ran off to lick its wounds. Sighing in relief that he actually beat the beast, he looked in his backpack to see if the kits were all right. They were fine, but Ichigo looked kind of mad that he wasn't involved in the fight. Benaheim, however, was different altogether. She was shaking in absolute fear. That brought a frown to Naruto's face. He honestly didn't mean to scare her, but he needed to blow off some steam, and he honestly didn't trust anyone right now to leave them alone with some clones. After reassuring her that nothing bad would happen to them, he took off deeper into the forest. It was many miles until he found himself near a majestic waterfall. Smiling, he set his pack down and got right to training. During that day, and through most of the night, he worked on the jutsus he stole from Muka and Ishikawa. Over the month that he worked on them, he oddly found that the earth and water techniques came easy to him. He would figure it out eventually, but now it was time for his next technique. This one he deliberately put off using for quite some time. Walking over to the stones on the left side, near the waterfall, he brought his hands up into the snake's seal and whispered, "Earth style, hidden in stone's jutsu." Raising his hand up, he pressed it against the hard surface. He then started phasing through and into the stone surface, Using his other senses, he moved to the right, getting used to the feeling of his body being encased in stone. Finally, after 5 minutes, he came out on the right side of the waterfall. His body looked like the stone for a minute until he fully brought himself out into the clearing. Not bad, Blondie. It took me nearly 10 minutes to do that. Ishikawa praised the preteen. Yeah, thanks for the tip on that one. I honestly did not know what I would do if it failed. Naruto thanked the spirit after panting a bit. You would have died, that's what. While it rarely happens nowadays, it's still bound to happen. I'll make sure to remember that, the Kurashige user remarked before laying on his back. Kid, I believe it's time to head back, Ishikawa suggested. Hell no, I'm not done training. Besides, I don't want to see Sarutobi for a long time. Naruto angrily replied. Dude, no need to be too harsh on the old guy. I mean, sure, he lied, but he feels bad. Doesn't that count for anything? Hell no. And what's with the change of personality? When we first met, you were cold and sadistic, but now you're as lazy as Shikamaru. Dude, if you knew me in stone, then you would know that I'm the biggest slacker out there. All right, granted, in my younger days, I was a hard ass, but once I spent years in the wilderness, I learned to chill. But there's a time to chill and a time to fight. You were just unlucky enough to meet me in battle mode. The dead Kamazu boredly remarked his life. And that I was a leaf ninja, was Naruto's retort. Ai swime. I was taught to hate the leaf with a passion. Stone has always been a military village from day one, and that has been drilled into our heads. But now that I'm dead thanks to you, I can finally chill for eternity once I fulfilled my purpose here. Ishikawa casually replied as he laid in midair and stared at the clouds. What is your purpose anyways? Beats me. Before I left Purgatory, Lord Shinigami cryptically said I would know when the time came. The dead stone Chunin replied before falling asleep. Lazy ass, Naruto muttered before bringing his hands behind his head. Not like it matters I'm staying here. The hell you are, Shinigami piped up. Oh, come on. Can't I do something for myself for once? The mask wearer protested. Not while I'm here, the god of death replied. Listen, I know you're peeved at the old man, but he is genuinely sorry for what he did. And on the bright side is that you have him under your thumb. Seeing his avatar raise an eyebrow at him, he continued. Hiruzen knows what you are. He would be a fool to continue denying your rights. Geez, the way you say it. It makes me sound like a spoiled brat. Naruto replied before turning his head to see the fox kits heading towards him. It does sound like it, but in reality, you deserve it. Like you said, you fought, bled, and died for the village. You earned your power and didn't take the easy way out like Kakashi or the other Uchiha. You have practiced those skills until you made them your own, and for that you deserve what was denied to you. Are you smoking something? His sweat dropped, feeling like the god was out of his damn mind. And it confirmed it when he heard an inhaling sound and a satisfying sigh of satisfaction. Fine, whatever, I'll leave, but I'll be back here eventually. Yeah, you do that, Kyoh, my god, a giant pink elephant. Naruto only sighed before picking the kits up and placing them in his backpack again. Putting his hand in the tiger hand seal, he whispered, Chameleon Jutsu. Concentrating, he focused the usage of the jutsu around his body until he disappeared. Smirking under this invisible technique, he was glad that he learned this from Ishikawa's body. For what he experienced, this ninja escape technique allowed the user to control how light is reflected around their body with chakra inflections. And from further practicing, the technique also erased the user's scent and shadow and was usable on any terrain. Leaping over the river, he headed towards the fence where he entered. However, before he got to it, he came to a sudden stop, seeing 2 Leaf Jonin patrolling the perimeter. Narrowing his eyes, he wondered why this area was fenced off. Sure, it looked spooky, and a giant tiger tried to maul him, but he faced much worse when he was younger. Seeing the 2 Jonin starting to converse, he strained to hear what they were saying. Why did Hokage-sama assign us to guard this shit hole again? The first unremarkable one asked. For the 10th time, it was our turn to stand guard. The second one, wearing red-framed sunglasses, replied irritably. I don't see why. No one ever goes into the forest of death besides that crazy snake slut. Snalk is slut. Naruto questioned. Will you quit ragging on her? It's not her fault, Dash. Yes, it is. The first one bellowed angrily. That vile student of Orochimaru deserves to die for her traitorous actions to the Leaf. Her and the Kyuubi brat both deserved to die for their dash. He didn't get to finish before he was punched in the jaw by the second one, who had an angry look on his face. I told you time and time again not to mock those two. Just because your wife left you after your failed attempted pursuit of her, and you lost your home to the Kyuubi attack, does not justify for your actions towards them. The first Jonin only glared at him before wiping his mouth. Shut your damn mouth, Aoba. Just because you're a special Jonin doesn't mean you are better than me. The man, now revealed to be Aoba, only sighed at the man's stupidity. Reaching to his turtleneck sweatshirt, he gently pressed on it and said, "Target acquired and is ready for transport." The Jonin only looked confused before two Umbu Black Ops members suddenly appeared beside him. He started sputtering as they drew their katanas and crossed them over his neck. "Aoba, what is the meaning of this?" the Jonin demanded. "You broke the Hokage's law, you moron. And you also insulted one of our most highly respected interrogation experts. I had hopes that you would look past your prejudice for the two. But looks like I was wrong." Aoba stared at the man hard after finishing his sentence. While you couldn't see his eyes, you could feel the anger from them. "Take him away, boys. I'm sure Ibiki would love to have a chat with him." The last thing Naruto saw of the man was him screaming in denial before he vanished with the two elite shinobi. Everything was silent for the moment before the man, named Aroba, looked towards him. Nudging his head, the black-streaked blonde knew he was busted. But seeing that there was no use hiding anymore, he undid his jutsu and leaped from his tree perch. Doing a few acrobatic tricks in midair, he landed next to the special Jonin. The man only clapped a little bit before saying, "I give the hiding a 6 out of 10 and the landing an 8 out of 10. "How did you notice me?" Naruto asked him. Aoba only smirked at him. "I've used that jutsu enough times to know when it's being used." "You know it?" he asked him. "Of course I fought in the Third Great Shinobi War. I killed a stone ninja and took it from his corpse." "Wait, there's no way you could have done that. Except if you were in the Umbu Black Ops." Naruto reasoned out, unfortunately remembering how to actually retrieve the information for a corpse. Aoba was stunned to say the least after hearing that. This kid, who was undoubtedly the Kyuubi container found out on his first try. He kept his past experiences as a Umbu ninja hidden for many reasons, mostly because his work was grisly and hard on the soul. That was why he quit straight after the war ended and became a special Jonin for his skills and the knowledge of the human body. "How did you figure out?" he asked the mask-wearing preteen. "Kakashi-sensei once told up what hunter ninjas do during our last mission, and I heard the Umbu do the same thing. Once I got back, I decided to look it up to see if it was up my alley." Naruto replied truthfully, for the most part at least. The special Jonin just shook his head and looked back at him. "That job is not glorious. Listen, Naruto, promise me that you will not pursue that position." Raising an eyebrow behind his mask, the black-streaked blonde only shrugged his shoulders. "Okay, I want as long as you let me go back in that forest every so often." Aoba looked skeptical when he heard that. Only high-level shinobi like himself, Kakashi, and Anko were allowed in there. He was going to object, but he saw that there was no scratch on the preteen. From his experience as an Umbu operative, he observed his clothes. There was a good amount of dirt and sweat coating his clothing, and from his calculations, he was in there for a little over a 24-hour period. Pretty impressive for a genin. Not an ordinary genin, of course, but a genin nonetheless. While every ounce was being screamed at him to say no, he instead replied, "All right, but stay safe, all okay?" Naruto only smirked under his mask in reply. "Who do you think you're talking to?" "That's what I'm afraid of." The man deadpanned before the preteen only shrugged at him before running off. Once he was gone, the man let out a shudder he was holding in ever since he started talking to the kid. "That damn mask," he sighed remembering it, and all the horrors that caused him to lose sleep at night. While Naruto sped away from the special Jonin, he noticed that the village seemed quieter than usual. No, wait, it still was pretty noisy, but something was missing. Straining his ears, he heard a soft noise, but a few seconds later, it kept getting louder by the second. He didn't know what to think of it before a bell rang in his head of alerting danger. Thinking on his feet like he always did, Naruto jumped away and onto the nearest roof. Almost immediately, he saw Sasuke running past him, and behind him were his ever-loyal fangirls. Naruto shuddered, realizing why Sasuke always ran from them before he was too dumb to understand, but now it made complete sense. Sasuke wasn't gay like most of the guys thought, but he wasn't interested in girls who wasted their time. If they trained to be stronger, he might have approached them with a romantic interest, though in Naruto's mind he knew Sasuke would rather train than do that. While he hated to admit it, Sasuke didn't deserve what was happening to him, so he decided to do something about it, if nothing else than to get scare the fangirls. So with a devious smile, he brought both his index and middle fingers into a familiar cross seal. Sasuke, meanwhile, wasn't enjoying himself. All he wanted to do was buy some tomatoes. That's all he wanted. But then Sakura showed up out of the middle of nowhere. By the time he realized it, he was being chased by 20 fangirls. Kami, he hated fangirls. They were pathetic and useless. Okay, maybe not useless, because someone had to be cannon fodder. In his desperation to get rid of them, he turned down a nearby alleyway, but his eyes widened in horror when he saw he came to a dead end. Turning around, he saw the evil faces of his fan club slowly approach him. If he was thinking clearly, he would have just climbed up the wall using chakra, but instead his thoughts were distracting him. Breathing heavily, he closed his eyes as he wished for something, anything that would get him out of this mess. And he got that wish with a barrage of balloons. The girls screamed in horror when the first balloon hit Sakura's oversized and still massively bruised forehead. They looked around and wondered who would dare strike them with paint, but only got hit again and again and again. Pretty soon they were bombarded with literally hundreds of balloons. Through the screaming and crying at their ruined outfits, Naruto's clones took out their smoke bombs and threw them in front of Sasuke. The real Naruto took action barely a second later, bringing his hands into the Tiger Hand seal, and a small cloud of smoke enveloped him as he descended into the smokescreen. Stepping out a second later, scarring the girls for life, was the Shinigami himself. His long flowing white hair and yukata blowing in the wind, his hollow black eyes pierced into them, and his malicious sharp teeth were grinning behind the dagger in his mouth. "Flee mortals, the boy's soul is mine," the monstrous god growled out. The girls, while stupid, weren't dumb enough to try and fight a god of all things. So with a scream that nearly deafened everyone around them, they ran as if their lives depended on it. As the smoke cleared, Sasuke coughed. He opened his eyes to thank the person who helped him, but once he took a look, he fell straight on his ass. Eyes widening in fear that the Shinigami himself came to take his soul. It wasn't fair. He never got to kill Itachi, nor would he get to revive his clan to their former glory. Deciding that he was going to take it like a man, he closed his eyes and waited for the inevitable. "Hey Sasuke, are you okay?" That voice. Sasuke opened his eyes to still see the imposing form of the Shinigami himself. But the mighty deity smiled, and in a burst of smoke, he vanished. And in his place stood none other than Naruto Uzumaki. At first, the Uchiha didn't know what to do. The first emotion was relief, quickly followed by disbelief, then anger. Getting to his feet, he said the first thing that came to his mind. "Dobe, what the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. The black-streaked blonde only blinked behind his mask. "So this is the thanks I get for saving your sorry ass?" Sasuke only humphed in response. The Uchiha didn't want to admit it, but he was right. Who knows what would have happened to him when they get their claws on him? For years, there have been debates about what happened to the poor souls that were caught by fangirls. Some said they devoured your soul. Others said they devour you whole once they turned into their true form. Or in Kakashi's case, he just thought that you got your brain screwed out before being devoured mentally. In any case, he didn't want to know or find out. So burying his Uchiha pride for now, he lifted his right arm towards the former full blonde. Naruto only nodded before bringing his left arm out and shook Sasuke's hand. It wasn't much, but it was a start. But from reading a book when he was as young as 8, he remembered that to create a friendship, they had a bond. Now what did Sasuke and him have in common? Well, they had a rivalry going on, but what else? Mentally thinking, he found a perfect way to actually help both himself and Sasuke at the same time. "Hey Sasuke, you want to learn how to avoid them forever?" he asked him. Looking up, Sasuke's face told him exactly what he thought about it. He had never really realized until now just how depressing the Uchiha compound was. Naruto followed Sasuke back to his compound so he could actually make a deal. When he first told him of a way to avoid fangirls, he told him that they would need a private place to practice. Through his masked face, he saw his cousin have conflicting emotions. what was going on in his head that made his stoic look almost falter. But the Uchiha only told him to follow him after a minute later. Now he realized the cause of Sasuke's emotions. This place that was once his home were the reminders of the Uchiha massacre that pervaded the Uchiha compound to fuel his cousin's desire for revenge. The entire compound was a total wreck. There were several destroyed houses. Others looked like they were in desperate need of repair. Old bloodstains littered the walls in and outside the many homes where bodies once lied. And the entire place just seemed to reek of anger and despair. He had to truly wonder if this was actually the place his mom grew up in. As the duo continued trekking through the ruined compound, the Kurashigan user settled his eyes on the Sharingan user. He was still finding it hard to believe he actually had family in this village. While it was not an unwelcome thought, he honestly had to wonder if this would work out with his long-lost cousin. As they continued, walking, his mind drifted back towards his academy days. Things were relatively simple back then. He wasn't burdened with all these emotions swelling up inside him. All you had to do was stay awake during Irika's boring lectures, spar and train a little, but in his case a lot. Any further thoughts were halted when they arrived at the biggest, yet modest house in the compound. Sasuke unlatched the front wooden gates and swung the small door open, making its rusty hinges give off a loud, squeaking noise. "Follow me," was all Sasuke said before continuing towards the oaken door. Frowning behind his masks, Naruto wondered what was getting Sasuke so sad. Normally, the Uchiha boy was good at hiding his emotions like he used to, but since he arrived at this gloomy place, his mood plummeted to a whole new emo level. Staying quiet, he just followed him. Once inside, the black-streaked blonde looked around. The house was ordinary, completely filled with dirt and dust, but ordinary. Slowly following the Uchiha, he calmly looked around the place. Still, it was covered with dust, and a few things were broken once they got further in, like there was a sign of struggle. Sasuke, however, kept moving ahead, his onyx black eyes looking straight ahead. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto just couldn't figure out what was so special about this place. Turning his head, he saw a fireplace, and atop of the mantel was a picture that was covered with a thick layer of dust. Seeing Sasuke was in a trance-like state, the Shinigami's avatar decided to take a quick detour. Since he could find Sasuke anytime he wanted, on the account that his footprints could easily been seen thanks to the thick layer of dust on the floor, he silently jumped towards the fireplace. Landing without a sound, Naruto gently picked the picture frame up and was careful to not break it. Wiping the dust away, he was shown what was in the picture frame. The first person revealed was a man with short, brown hair that framed the sides of his head and onyx black eyes, with visible creases below them. He was wearing a blue robe with gray pants and brown Geta sandals. While he didn't know who he was, Naruto had a very bad feeling about this man. Wiping more dust off revealed the second figure, this one being a woman. She had a gentle heart-shaped face that was framed by her long raven black hair that almost perfectly matched her dark gray eyes. Her outfit was pretty modest because she wore nothing but a nice form-fitting gray dress and a tan apron. Whoever she was, she actually made the former full blonde smile. After wiping away some more dust, revealed a male teenager. He, like the woman in the picture, possessed dark gray eyes, black hair that hung near his cheeks to frame his face, and a long ponytail in the back of his head. However, his most distinguishing characteristics were the long, pronounced tear troughs under his eyes. The teenager was also wearing a black, loose turtleneck t-shirt and some black pants that went to the middle of his shins. Naruto studied this person closely. A faint voice in his head was telling him to keep alert. And finally, wiping the rest of the dust away, he nearly dropped the picture in shock. The last person was a younger Sasuke. Taking a small breath, he knew exactly why Sasuke seemed to be zoning out when he entered this place. This was his old home, the place where he lost his family. With a sad sigh, the former full blonde placed the picture back on the mantel and quickly jumped away and landed back, or at least near his footprints. The instant he landed, he went into a strong and fast power walk. Scanning the floor for Sasuke's footprints, he easily followed them. With several seconds going by, he reappeared behind the brooding Uchiha and wondered if he noticed that he was gone. Sasuke, however, just opened the damaged paper door and brought him outside. Seeing that happen, Naruto let out a small sigh of relief that he didn't even know he was holding. He honestly didn't know if Lady Luck loved him at the moment, if Shinigami's chuckling was any indication, but whoever it was he thanked before following his cousin out to what looked like the backyard. Just like the rest of the entire compound, it was damaged in some way and was overgrown with weeds. Finally, Sasuke stopped and turned towards him, indication this was the location he wanted to train at. "All right, Dope, tell me what I gave to exactly do to avoid them," he demanded. Narrowing his eyes at the demand, Naruto was starting to question doing this. "The thing I will teach you is a jutsu." He trailed off when Sasuke activated his Sharingan on two conditions. That threw the Uchiha for a loop because he honestly thought he was going to learn something useful. But then the Dobe of all people stopped him cold. Inwardly, he was seething, but at the same time curious. So, keeping his mouth shut, he asked what they were. "The first is to learn this on your own, so turn your jutsu off," the former full blonde commanded. Seeing Sasuke about to explode in anger, he raised up his hand to stop him. "Sasuke, while your jutsu is extremely powerful, it's not without its drawbacks." "Drawbacks?" Sasuke asked, confused. "Yes, you see the Sharingan can't keep up with extreme speed. Unless you're just as fast, that powerful dojutsu of yours is useless. Also, you have to keep full eye contact with your opponent, but unless they're wearing a mask like me, or trained to somehow keep the Sharingan useless like Zabuza, you're screwed. And finally, the longer you keep it active, the more chakra you waste to keep it active. Plus, if you use ninjutsu, genjutsu, or even enhancing your speed with chakra, you'll be left vulnerable and exhausted, thus making you easy pickings for your enemies. Plus, it's not wise to get dependent on it. After all, look what happened to Kakashi during the bridge battle." Naruto lectured his cousin from personal experience and what Shinigami explained to him. Sasuke, meanwhile, was stunned that Naruto, of all people, said that. And actually made sense too. As he could feel his chakra slipping away, he deactivated his eyes. Seeing Sasuke taking his advice put a small grin behind Naruto's masks. Finally, they were getting somewhere, but he honestly hoped that Sasuke wouldn't take this the wrong way. And the second condition, seeing his cousin pay attention, he continued, "is to learn this jutsu. I would like to learn something in return. Say, a fire jutsu." The Uchiha visibly narrowed his eyes at that. What was his teammate up to? Never before did he wish to learn anything for him. He kept thinking about it until the mask wearer spoke up. "The longer you stall, the faster those fangirls will plot to capture you." "All right, I'll do it," Sasuke blurted out without thinking. But once he realized what he said, he covered his mouth as if to bring the words back. "It's a deal then," Naruto replied, smirking his foxy grin. So, ignoring Sasuke's heated glare, he took off his backpack, brought his hands into the tiger hand seal, and thought the jutsu in his mind. And after a few seconds of concentrating, he focused the usage of the jutsu around his body until he disappeared. Sasuke was stunned, just completely stunned. He moved his head every which way to try and find him. But unfortunately, while he was distracted, Naruto crept up. Grinning his famous prankster's grin, he brought his hands to the back of Sasuke's shorts, hooked his hands on his boxers, and yanked them up, effectively giving the Uchiha a wedgie. Sasuke screamed. Oh, how he did scream at the unpleasant sensation that he found himself in. He felt mental pain from when Itachi showed him the slaughter of his clan with an advanced Genjutsu, and he felt physical pain when Haku barraged his entire body with Senbon. But neither of them compared to both the physical and emotional pain he was experiencing right now. He felt embarrassed, humiliated, angry, and knew he wouldn't be able to sit down for several hours because of this. And it honestly didn't help hearing Naruto rolling on the ground in laughter behind him. That was not funny, the Uchiha screamed at him. I'm sorry, but I honestly couldn't pass it up, Naruto replied as he continued to laugh his ass off. Sasuke was about to go over and pound some sense into the former full bond until he heard a few yipping sound behind him. Turning his head, he saw the fox kit with a nasty scar on its face laughing, or what he thought of as a laugh, while the other one looked like it was sighing at the situation, raising an eyebrow, seeing them again. So, soon he wondered why Naruto brought them along, and how is it that they were doing human emotions. Naruto immediately stopped, seeing his cousin look at both Ichigo and Benaheim. Tapping into the powers of his Juganai, he focused its power into reading his thoughts, and sighed in relief, seeing that he was just curious and didn't hold any animosity towards them. Deciding the joke was over, the mask wearer got to his feet and headed towards them. That Sasuke was called the chameleon jutsu. This technique bends the environment around you, so you're practically invisible, he told him. Now it's time to hold up your side of the bargain. While Sasuke was stunned to hear that such a technique existed, he only nodded and went to the pond that they used to own. Once there, he thought about what technique to show the creepy mask wearer. He couldn't exactly show him any high-level techniques, because he didn't know them either. He could possibly show him a weapon. Nah, it didn't feel right to rip him off, much to his surprise. Plus, there wasn't a jutsu that turned a weapon into fire. But finally, after a few minutes, he decided to show him the technique his father showed him that allowed him to carry the Uchiha crest on his back. Watch carefully, though, because I'm only going to show you once, Sasuke told him. Before bringing his hands up, he slowly showed Naruto the 7 hand seals until he landed on the tiger hand seal. Then, bringing his right thumb and index finger around his mouth, he roared out, "Fire style, Fireball Jutsu." He then took a deep breath and then expelled from his mouth in a massive orb of roaring flame. The fireball roared over the pond, making the scummy water sizzle and evaporate until the big ball of fire dissipated. Naruto stood off to the sidelines and watched his cousin do his jutsu. And he did remember everything Sasuke showed him, but he didn't activate his Kurashigan. During his 2 weeks of training, he promised himself he would never copy an ally's techniques. Whoever said that shinobi had no honor was full of crap, in his opinion. While they did work in the shadows and did various work for the highest paying client, he denied doing that sort of action. He learned from experience that it took hard work to achieve your goals. Take Rock Lee, for example. He was incapable of doing any ninjutsu or jinjutsu. Instead, he made up for his lack of those 2 areas and focused on taijutsu. And throughout the years, he pushed his body to the breaking point and beyond to become as good as he was today. That was the sole reason that he would never steal from an ally and master Handen Ryoku with his own 2 hands without the help of shadow clones. After Sasuke cut off the supply of chakra to cancel his jutsu, he turned to look at the black stare-wreaked blonde. While he couldn't see past his mask, he knew Naruto paid close attention to how he did his technique. Nodding towards him, he ushered him by the pond before he walked off to practice his new jutsu. After the 2 passed each other, Naruto immediately went for his Hanya mask. Pulling it up enough to the point where his mouth could be seen, he brought his fingers to his half mask and pulled it to below his chin. While he wanted to try and perform the jutsu with his mask on, he honestly couldn't risk setting his face on fire, at least until he perfected the technique without it, of course. Suddenly bringing his hands up, he flashed his hands through the hand seals. However, he messed up on the 3rd one before stopping himself. Now wasn't the time for flashy hand seals. He had to take it slow and steady. So taking a deep breath, he tried it again slowly this time until finally he landed on the tiger hand seal. "Fire style, Fireball Jutsu," he screamed within his mind before bringing his right thumb and index finger around his mouth and opened it. The only thing that came out was a giant flume of smoke that severely burned his throat. Hacking up the black smoke along with a bit of saliva, he gasped, clutching his chest. By the love of the Shinigami, that hurt. It honestly felt like he was forced to swallow magma, and it went down his lungs. After another minute of hacking and coughing up something gross, and ignoring Ichigo's laughter, he steadied himself and tried again. Meanwhile, Sasuke was having the same problem. While the hand seal was easy to remember, he honestly had trouble blending in with the surroundings. Every time he focused his chakra around his body, he could feel himself disappearing. But as suddenly as the feeling came, it vanished in an instant. Panting a bit, he narrowed his eyes. How did the dope do it? While he would never admit it, Naruto had outclassed him in this area. But from hearing the former full blonde hacking, he knew he was having the same problem as he did once he started learning that jutsu. After 15 minutes, and 2 frustrated preteens later, they decided to call it quits. And while one was arrogant and the other stubborn, they both knew that it was pointless trying to practice a jutsu while they were frustrated. So with Naruto putting his masks on and nudging the kits in his backpack, and Sasuke dusting himself off, they proceeded to walk back through the deserted house. As they trekked through the house, Naruto was staring straight ahead. He mentally decided that if he was going to eventually live here, there had to be some drastic changes. Of course, that meant that Sasuke would have to learn that he was in fact a Uchiha like him. This plan involved weeks maybe even months of planning. And, of course, building a friendly relationship up with Sasuke so that he would get used to the idea that there was another Uchiha than himself. Sasuke, however, was observing his former home with little interest. Not long after the Uchiha massacre, he was given his apartment in order to relieve himself of any horrid memories he had of this place. And in his youth, he thought this was absurd, but after heading back to his former home to find out what Itachi meant in the Uchiha meeting place to uncover the true power of the Uchiha clan. But once he set foot into the compound, the vicious memories flashed through his mind. And after he discovered the great secret of the Uchiha clan, he vowed to never step foot into his former home again until he avenged his clan. But now here, he was 4 years later breaking his vow. And he had to ask himself why. Why did he break it by bringing the dobe just to learn a new jutsu that was going to be a pain in the ass to learn? Sure, he desperately wanted to get rid of his annoying fangirls. That definitely was one reason, but there was this nagging feeling that absolutely demanded that he do this. Scanning his eyes around the place, he spotted his old family picture. While everything else was dusty, the picture was clean. Was this some sort of divine intervention telling him something? Any other pondering he would have done was abruptly halted when Naruto and himself outside of his house. "Hey Sasuke, what do you usually do during the day?" Naruto questioned the Uchiha. "I train dobe. Nothing more, nothing less." Sasuke answered the former, full blonde. "Not today, you're coming with me." The mask wearer responded before grabbing him by the back of his shirt and jumping away. Sasuke, of course, protested this action, from trying to kick his back to screaming at him. Naruto, however, just ignored him and jumped towards the direction he was heading. "Damn it, Dobe, where are you taking me?" the raven-haired preteen demanded. "We're going to visit the academy," he responded as he continued jumping towards it. Irika Yumino was honestly not having a good day. While he loved teaching the next generation of shinobi to protect the village with all their hearts, sometimes some days were just terrible. After his last class graduated into the shinobi ranks, while only 9 graduated and the remaining students were sent to a different class for further training. He took on another generation of future shinobi, but they were just evil little bastards. They hardly paid attention to his lessons. They practically shouted over each other to hear themselves, and his big scary head jutsu was only a temporary solution that lasted an hour. Clasping his hands together, he prayed to any merciful being out there to help him with his class. "I don't want to go in there," a voice shouted behind his door. "Oh, come on. You honestly don't want to see your former sensei?" Another one replied to the first one. "That class was ungodly boring. All he did was teach us history that had absolutely nothing to do with killing a man with a kunai." Yes, it was ungodly boring, but the man at least deserves to see his old students. Who knows, your skills might rub off on the next generation. "I don't want them to rub off on me," the first voice whined. "Don't whine, it makes you look bad," the second voice said to the first one before the door was kicked open. For the first time today, the entire class stopped screaming at each other and looked towards the disturbance. Immediately, a figure was thrown into the classroom, stunning every occupant in the room. "Sasuke," Irika asked the very familiar figure on the floor. "The one and only Irika Sensei," Sasuke replied as he got himself off the ground. "And don't you dare forget about me, Sensei," Naruto said, walking through the door. As expected, Irika freaked out seeing him. While the man didn't fight in the Third Great Shinobi War, he certainly read about the famous berserkers that terrorized their shinobi during that terrible war. However, his former teacher looked him up and down. Seeing the familiar beat-up leaf Hittite displayed as a belt buckle, the familiar spiky if slightly different blonde hair, and seeing the sublity of a caveman this person held, he knew who exactly person was. "Naruto," he questioned the figure. "Wow, you're actually the first person to guess right the first time." Naruto answered his former teacher. The scarred-faced Chunin couldn't believe his eyes. That was Naruto? What happened to the short, scrawny, orange-wearing, hyperactive youth that he remembered from his academy days? Barely 2 months ago, the Naruto he remembered practically demanded a C-ranked mission. But now standing right in his doorway plain as day was a tall, muscular, black-wearing, sword-wielding, and calm preteen that was just the opposite of the Naruto he knew. "I see you're having more trouble with this class than you had with us," the mask wearer stated, as both Sasuke and himself heard the screaming from outside the hall. And sure enough, the class full of brats erupted into their useless conversations. It made both Naruto and Sasuke narrow their eyes at their disrespectful behavior. Granted, Naruto was no saint to being disrespectful towards Iruka or any other authority figure, but that was just his lovable personality. Looking at the Uchiha, the two nodded towards each other in complete agreement for what they were about to do. Using the scary memories of Iruka, using that jutsu that controlled them through fear, they did his infamous big scary head just do. It was rather simple, really. All they had to do a partial transformation jutsu to their heads and enlarge them to scare the living hell out of everyone, and of course yell with all their strength in order for it to be really effective. "Shut the hell up, you little brats!" Sasuke screamed at the top of his lungs as his head grew to enormous size. "Or we will devour your souls." Naruto finished as his head grew to the same size as Sasuke's, and for an added effect, he added a tiny amount of Kyuubi's chakra into his vocal cords, giving him a demonic voice. Much to Iruka's surprise, the horrid little demons completely ceased their chattering, and all looked at the two with their eyes wide in absolute fear. Cracking his knuckles loudly, Naruto grinned evilly under his masks. "So you little brats don't want to learn from Iruka, huh?" Sasuke crossed his arms and glared at them. "While I loathe my teammate for bringing me here, I believe I could spend a few hours teaching you brats what a real shinobi can do to you. So, I suggest you run before we destroy you," the former full blonde told them. "Right now," the raven-haired Uchiha calmly said before pulling out a kunai. The bratty students that were making Iruka's teaching duties an unholy hell looked at them like they were pulling their legs. But when Naruto took out his own kunai, threw it into the crowd of youngsters, and watched it sink into the desk, they screamed in horror before bolting out of the classroom like a bat out of hell. "Naruto! Sasuke! What is wrong with you two?" Iruka demanded his former students after he realized what on earth just happened. "Teaching the little heathens a lesson," Sasuke casually replied. "Sorry, sensei, but we'll have to get back to you later," Naruto said before both Sasuke and himself disappeared through the open windows. Normally, Iruka would have gone after them, but if he was being honest with himself, he was glad they were gone. Slumping down into his chair, he sighed tiredly when he looked at the empty classroom. He liked kids. That was why he decided to become a teacher, but now he was wondering if it was truly worth all the gray hairs he knew he was getting. Closing his eyes, he soon found himself asleep, completely exhausted from all of it. It would be half an hour later when the door slammed open did he awake from the well-needed nap. Opening his eyes, I glanced up to see several of his students stumble into his class with wide eyes and completely exhausted.